I picked up a last-minute shift at the hospital a couple of weeks ago. I was already worn out from a long week, but they needed help. It felt like something was off from the start. The hospital usually buzzed with noise, but tonight it was eerily quiet. The lights flickered harshly above me as I walked down the stark white hallways. I checked in on my patients. My shoes squeaked against the slick floor. When I reached a patient room, I noticed the light flickering. I could have sworn I saw movement inside. I hesitated, then walked closer. I heard soft crying, but it seemed to drift away. I opened the door, and there was nobody. The room was empty. The patient had been discharged hours ago. I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks. The night dragged on. I continued my rounds. I started to notice more odd things. The equipment acted strangely, and the lights blinked in the supply room. My heart raced as I passed a darkened hallway. I thought I saw a shadow dart away. I blinked, and it vanished. Was I imagining it? Maybe I was just too tired. I tried to shake it off. I found Sarah, one of my colleagues, and told her what I saw. She laughed lightly. "You're just tired, Mark. It happens." I thought maybe she was right. But then I heard the voices. They whispered through the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but it sent shivers down my spine. An hour passed, and I stepped into the break room. I poured myself a cup of coffee. My hands shook as I held the mug. It felt like someone was watching me. I scanned the room, but it was empty, just me and my thoughts. I told myself to breathe and calm down. When I returned to the hall, I came across the flickering room again. I knew I had to check it. I opened the door. A cold draft washed over me. I'd never felt anything like it. "Hello," I whispered into the room. Silence replied. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. A figure at the end of the hall. It stood there, watching. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, and it was gone. I felt frozen. Was I losing my mind, or was something really there? Panic surged through me as I stumbled back. Suddenly the lights went out. They flickered back on, and I felt eyes on me. I wanted to run, but I heard the soft crying again. Where was it coming from? Was I alone? My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around. I didn't know what to do. I stumbled back to the break room, trying to gather myself. The flickering light had made everything feel unreal, but I had to go back. I needed to know if it was all in my head or if something dark was lurking in the shadows. The unease stayed with me, wrapping tighter as I took one last breath and headed back down the corridor. The corridor felt longer as I walked back, shadows reaching out and pulling me in. I took slow, careful steps, my senses heightened. Each creak of the floor and hum of the ventilation made me jump. I was trying to prepare myself for whatever I might find. The flickering room came into view. I paused before the door, my heart racing again. Was it just a trick of the light, or was there something inside? I pushed the door open wider this time, ready for anything. The room was dim, the overhead light casting strange shapes on the walls. I stepped inside cautiously. The air felt heavy, like it was charged with energy. The sound of crying was clearer now, soft and pitiful. My skin crawled. I could feel the hair on my arms stand on end. "Hello?" I tried calling out again, but my voice felt small in the vast silence. I turned slowly, scanning the room for any sign of a person or anything else. And then I saw it, a small figure huddled in the corner, half hidden by the bed. My stomach churned. "Are you okay?" I whispered, taking another step closer. Suddenly the figure lifted its head. It was a child, no older than 7, with wide, tear-streaked eyes that seemed to reflect fear and sadness. My heart sank. "Where are your parents?" I asked, but I already knew. I wouldn't have heard crying if someone were with them. The child didn't respond. Instead, they pointed at the far wall. Confused, I looked over. There was nothing there but peeling paint and shadow. "What is it?" I pressed again, but all I got was a silent, trembling stare. Then, without warning, the lights flickered more violently, plunging us into near darkness. I gripped the edge of the bed, trying not to panic. I could barely breathe, and I thought I heard the whispers again, louder this time, echoing from the walls. They surrounded me, as if the very hospital was alive with voices. The child shrank back, eyes wide with terror, and my instincts kicked in. "It's okay. I'm here to help you." I stepped closer, but something pulled at me. I didn't want to be there anymore. I turned to leave, hoping to find someone else who could help. But before I could reach the door, the lights went out completely. An intense darkness enveloped the room, wrapping around me like a shroud. I heard the soft crying again, but now it was right beside me. I felt a cold breath on my neck. "Mark," a voice whispered, familiar yet dissonant. My
sprinted for the door, adrenaline surging through me. As I burst into the hallway, I was met with a sickening sight. The figure I had seen before stood at the far end, silhouetted against the pale glow of emergency lights. It slowly turned its head toward me, and I realized it wasn't just standing there. It was coming closer, moving with an unnatural grace. I froze. There was no mistaking it. Whatever this was, it wasn't human. It was all too real. I needed to escape. But as I turned to flee, the whispers escalated to a deafening roar. I stumbled, disoriented, as panic gripped me tighter. I didn't know where to run. All I knew was that I was no longer alone in this nightmarish place.
I turned and ran, my breath hitching in my throat. The sounds of the whispers and the child's sobs intertwined, an eerie cacophony that clawed at my sanity. The figure was impossibly close now, shrouded in darkness except for its outline, moving eagerly toward me. I dashed down the hallway, legs pumping as I tried to outrun the fear. Each step echoed in the silence, bouncing off the walls of the sterile corridor. I couldn't think. I just needed to get away. I reached the end and skidded around a corner, barely keeping my footing. Then I stopped. Ahead was an emergency stairwell, an escape route. I shoved the door open and stumbled inside, pulling it closed behind me. The metal door clanged shut with a finality that temporarily eased my racing heart. I pressed my back against the wall and closed my eyes. I tried to catch my breath, counting slowly to 10. When I opened them again, I felt slightly more grounded. But the stillness lingered like the aftermath of a storm. I hesitated before heading down the stairs, uncertain if the shadows would follow. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, I focused on the sharp breathing and thudding heart that filled my ears. Memories of the child flooded my mind. What had happened to them? Why were they alone? But I couldn't think about that now. The pressure was building again, a sense of urgency I couldn't ignore. As I descended, the lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. I paused, listening. The whispers had returned, more distinct this time. It felt as if they were calling my name, coaxing me back upstairs. I shook my head and pressed on, desperate to leave the echoes behind. Finally, I reached the bottom level. As I pushed open the door, an unexpected chill rushed over me. I stepped into what appeared to be an abandoned area. The air was stale, laden with an unnatural heaviness. Discarded equipment lay scattered about, ghostly outlines of forgotten history. It was unsettling. That's when I saw it, a flickering screen at the end of the room, glowing in the darkness. I hesitated, feeling drawn to the light. What could be on it? As I approached, I realized the screen displayed a video feed of the hallway I had just fled. My heart sank. It seemed like a security monitor. I blinked at the surveillance footage. There was the empty hallway, but the frame changed. In the refresh, I saw the figure again, standing exactly where I had left it, its head tilting as if it could sense my presence. The whispers grew louder, swirling in my mind like a tornado. Suddenly, the monitor flickered and then stabilized. The image shifted again, now showcasing the room where I had found the child. Panic surged through me like wildfire. Had they been here the whole time? Then, to my horror, I heard a loud crash from the door behind me. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. My blood ran cold. I needed to decide quickly. Stay and confront whatever was coming, or run back up the stairs and face what lurked there. The sound of footsteps echoed as something, whatever it was, continued to pound against the door. I glanced back toward the monitor. I could still see the child's face, terrified and lost. I didn't have much time. I bolted from the monitor, feet carrying me toward the door I'd just entered through. With each step, the pounding intensified, like the beat of a war drum echoing through the musty air. I needed an escape, but the way behind me felt like it was closing in, like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. As I reached for the door handle, a noise stopped me cold. The crashing had stopped. Instead, I heard something else, a low, guttural sound. It crept in from the hallway, a kind of growl I'd never heard before. Panic rose within me as I pressed my ear to the door. I could feel my heart racing, pounding in rhythm with the heavy breathing on the other side. What was out there? I could sense it like a static energy filling the dimly lit room. I wanted to turn back to the monitor to see if there was more I could learn, but the dim glow felt ominous now, an invitation into darkness I wasn't willing to accept. I took a breath and scanned the room. There had to be something I could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a rusted metal pipe lying on the floor, remnants of the previous chaos. I grabbed it, feeling some semblance of courage return as I gripped it tightly. Silence hung like a thick fog. I could no longer hear whatever was out there. Was it gone? I braced myself against the wall next to the door, ready to swing the pipe if anything shadowy came for me.
I ducked low and counted the seconds in my head, feeling the tension crawl beneath my skin. 1, 2, 3. Then the door creaked, and I jumped. It cracked open slightly, just enough for a thin line of light to pour in. I held my breath. I needed to see what was on the other side, if only to prepare myself for what might come. I pressed my back against the wall, peeking around the door's edge. In the dim light, I could see a figure moving in the hallway, but it wasn't just the one I'd encountered earlier. There were 2 more now, each gassed in shadow, their shapes skimming along the corridor like wind through trees. I couldn't make out any distinct features, just the shift of their forms in an unnatural rhythm. The whispers, too, crept into my mind again, wrapping tighter around my thoughts. It was no longer just a voice. It was a chorus, a ghastly echo of pleas and cries. I felt bile rise in my throat as one of the shadows turned, facing my direction. Something about the way its head tilted sent icy fingers of dread dancing down my spine. I had to choose. I could remain hidden and hope they would pass, or make a break for it up the stairs, risking the wrath of whatever was behind me. My instincts screamed for flight, but I felt rooted to the spot.
Then the whisper shifted, calling out to me specifically, my name. It felt like a spell, a command to come closer. Before I could think, I made my decision. I stepped back from the door, pipe raised in defense, and prepared myself for what was about to come. The first shadow lunged, and I swung the pipe, hoping to connect before it could reach me. That's when the lights went out. I was plunged into darkness, the kind that wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. My pulse quickened, and I could hear nothing but the rush of blood in my ears. The shadows had come alive, swirling in the absence of light. I had no idea where the figures were now. Panic clawed at me as I strained to catch a sound, anything to tell me what was happening. I took a cautious step back, keeping the pipe raised. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move without knowing what lay beyond the wall of darkness. Breathing in shallow gasps, I let my eyes adjust. They wouldn't, of course. It was that dark, total, incomplete. I pressed my back against the cold metal of the door, heart racing, and tried to listen. Then I heard it, a whisper. It was soft, like the brush of a feather against my ear, no real sound at all. Panic surged as I felt the sensation of someone standing right beside me. I swung the pipe wildly, but it connected with nothing but air. They were too quick, too fluid in their movements. I could feel the temperature in the room drop, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into my skin. "Run," a voice tangled with the whispers. It wasn't just a plea, it was a command, urgent and desperate. I didn't recognize it, but it cut through the fog of fear, igniting an instinct to survive. I had to move. Turning sharply, I rushed toward the staircase on the opposite side of the room, my feet thumping against the floor. I tripped over something, the pipe clanging away as I stumbled. The light from earlier flickered back to life, illuminating the area momentarily before plunging me back into darkness. I could see the outline of the stairs now. They loomed ahead like a promise of safety. As I reached the first step, a low growl erupted behind me, sending a shiver down my spine. It was louder, closer. I darted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, adrenaline surging through my veins. Each footfall felt like thunder as I raced upward, but I couldn't afford to look back. I heard the sound of movement chasing me, but I pushed on, my legs burning with the effort. At the top, I burst into a small corridor. The lights flickered again, briefly illuminating the way ahead. I glanced back and saw the shadows coalescing in the stairwell below, their forms twisting, merging into one. I had to find a place to hide. The nearest door was cracked open, and without thinking, I dove inside, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against it, breath coming in ragged gasps. The whimpers from the hall echoed against my ears, muffled by the thick wooden door, each one ratcheting my anxiety even higher. Then everything fell silent. The whispers, the growling, all gone. I waited, straining to hear anything that might indicate where they went. Maybe I was safe. But then came a soft, persistent scratching at the door. That's when I realized the shadows weren't gone at all. They had just become more patient. I pressed my back against the door, my breath coming in desperate bursts. The scratching continued, slow and deliberate. It made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to shout at whatever was on the other side to leave me alone, but fear clamped my throat shut. I couldn't afford to make a sound. I turned my head ever so slightly, trying to peer through the sliver of light at the bottom of the door. All I could see was darkness. But then, for a split second, there was movement. Something slithered beneath the door, and I jerked back, heart racing again. The hallway was no longer just empty.
It felt alive, like a predator waiting to pounce. I could sense it. The shadows seemed to breathe, casting long fingers into the space I occupied. I had to find a way out. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. My heart dropped into my stomach. I strained to hear anything, and then I caught the sound of a chuckle, low and gravelly, resonating through the stillness. It sent chills through me, igniting another wave of adrenaline. Whatever was out there was toying with me. Run! The voice echoed through my mind again, but this time it was stronger, clearer. It felt like a warning. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to act. I searched for a way out, my fingers shaking as they brushed against the door's edges. There had to be a window, something to escape through. I glanced around the room, finally spotting a small, grimy window high up on the wall. It was my only option, but how would I reach it? Summoning every ounce of strength, I grabbed a metal chair parked in the corner. My muscles screamed in protest as I shoved it toward the wall beneath the window. I climbed on top, heartbeat thudding in my ears as I raised my hands. The glass glinted menacingly in the dim light, and with a trembling hand, I pushed against it. It didn't budge. Panic surged again. I needed to get out. The juggle returned, laced with the whispering shadows, and I could almost feel their breath on me. They were coming. I gave the glass a desperate shove with my shoulder. It finally cracked, splintering into jagged pieces that rattled as they fell. I didn't have time to think. I hoisted myself up to the opening, my heart racing, and scrambled through. But as I flailed, my foot slipped, catching on the window frame. I gasped, feeling myself tumble backward, weightless for an instant. The shadows had come to collect me, and I was falling into their grasp. Then everything went dark. When I came to, I was on the ground outside, the night air cool against my skin.
I had escaped, but I wasn't free. The silhouettes from earlier loomed in the distance. They watched, waiting. I stumbled to my feet, scanning my surroundings, searching for a path to safety. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light cutting through the darkness. But I could also hear the whispers, forming a chorus of my name, promising that something was coming for me. I had to move, and fast. I sprinted towards the flickering light, my lungs burning in the cold air. I didn't dare look back, not with those shadows still lurking behind me, whispering and laughing in that unnerving way. Each step felt like a gamble, like I was pushing against fate. As I got closer, I realized the light was spilling out from a doorway. It looked like an old maintenance shed, rusted and worn. My instincts screamed at me to keep running, but the lure of safety forced me to rethink my course. I ducked inside, pulling the door shut behind me as quietly as possible. Inside, the air smelled of age and neglect. Flickering fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow around piles of abandoned equipment. My heart still raced, but here, at least, it felt like I had some semblance of cover. I leaned against a wall, trying to catch my breath. That's when I noticed it. A small, unmarked box tucked away in the corner, partly hidden under an old tarp. Something about it drew me in, pulling at my curiosity. With hesitant steps, I approached and pulled the tarp away. The box looked ancient, its edges frayed and wood worn smooth. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I brushed against the surface. It felt oddly warm, and in that moment I could have sworn I heard a whisper in my ear. "Open it." The voice was soft, coaxing almost, much different from the growls I had heard earlier. It was alluring. But I hesitated. What if it was a trap? What if whatever was outside was waiting for me to make that mistake? Yet the shadows were persistent, whispering and encroaching on my thoughts. I had to know. I forced the lid open, each creak echoing like a scream in the stillness. Inside lay an array of objects, photographs, twisted metal pieces, and something that looked like a key. I sifted through them, heart racing. The photographs were disturbing, images of people, some familiar, some not, captured in moments of fear and dread. My stomach twisted at the sight, and then I spotted it, a faded photograph of a woman standing in front of the very hospital I had escaped from. Instantly I recognized her. She had been a nurse there when I was a patient, and she mysteriously vanished months ago. The shadows outside chittered in excitement, growing bolder, coaxing me to do something. But what? That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching, heavy, deliberate, and too close for comfort. They were coming. I needed to decide. Should I hide, risk being found in this cramp's ways, or take the key and confront whatever was hunting me? The footsteps drew nearer, prompting a sudden rush of fear. I grabbed the key, slipping it into my pocket just as the door creaked open. My breath caught, and I froze, praying I wouldn't be seen. Just then, a figure stepped inside. I could barely make out the details in the dim light,
but when they turned towards me, their shadows stretched across the room like a noose tightening around my neck. I was trapped. And then I realized I recognized that silhouette. The figure stepped deeper into the shed, and my heart raced harder. It was him, the nurse from the hospital, the one I had thought was lost to the shadows. But there was something wrong. The light flickered over her face, revealing dark circles under her eyes and an expression that was chillingly vacant. "Help me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It sent a jolt through me. I wanted to rush forward, to grab her and make sure she was okay, but caution held me back. Her words felt like a warning wrapped in desperation. "Where have you been?" I managed to stammer, confusion swirling in my mind. She blinked, her gaze darting around the shed as if she were searching for something. "You shouldn't have come here. It's not safe. They're coming for you," she said. Each word seemed to tangle with the shadows outside, feeding them with urgency and malice. My grip tightened around the key in my pocket. "I have to leave. There's something out there," I replied, glancing at the door, expecting the creeping darkness to spill in at any moment. "No, you can't go out there," she insisted, stepping closer, her hand outstretched. "The shadows, they have your name. You have to find the truth before they take you too." I hesitated, unsure of her intentions. How could she know about the shadows? "What truth?" I asked. My voice trembled, the earlier fear now morphing into something heavier. "The box, it's connected," she said, gesturing back at the forgotten corners of the shed. "You must—" Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the air. The clang of metal against metal echoed in the distance, followed by a low growl that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The shadows outside responded, writhing like disturbed creatures drawn to the commotion. "We don't have time," I said, feeling the weight of her gaze. I was torn between the urge to stay and uncover whatever secret she held, and the instinct to flee before the shadows closed in. "Take the key," she urged, her voice rising in urgency. "It'll lead you to what they want, to what you need to remember." Before I could respond, the door shook violently, splintering the moment. Whatever it was out there wanted in. I looked back at her, and her features seemed to blur with the flickering light. "I'm not safe," I shouted at her, but the space felt suffocating. Then without thinking, I pulled toward the door, past her as she cried out, "Wait!" I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the night.
The darkness wrapped itself around me, but I didn't look back. I sprinted for the tree line, where the shadows shifted ominously. Whatever I had awakened was angry now, and I could feel their pursuit just behind my heels. As I reached the trees, I stopped, panting, and fished the key from my pocket. It gleamed strangely in the dim light. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't seen the last of her, or those shadows. That's when I saw it, a glint of white among the trees, a path, or maybe a door, hidden just beyond the reach of the flickering light. I took a step forward, but the sound of shifting leaves reminded me of what was at my back. This was just the beginning. I took a hesitant step toward the glinting light. My fingers tightened around the key as I moved deeper into the trees, but every instinct screamed at me to turn back. The shadows were right behind me, swirling and pulsating, reaching toward me like long arms craving what they could not touch. But something compelled me to follow the light. I pressed on, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot drowned out by the fading growls behind me. With every step, I felt the temptation of answers pulling me closer to whatever lay ahead. The path opened up into a small clearing. In the center stood an old canvas tent, its fabric tattered and stained. It looked out of place, half buried by the wild growth. A chill stole over me, and the shadows danced along the edges of the clearing. I glanced behind. Nothing was there yet, but I could sense the danger lingering. I approached the tent cautiously. The light seeping through the fabric seemed almost sacred, illuminating knots in the threads. I reached out, fingers brushing the cool surface. It was then I heard the faint whisper, almost like a voice drifting on the wind. Come inside." I froze, the key almost slipping from my grip. The voice sounded eerily familiar, like the nurse that had warned me. Instinct told me to run, to escape, but curiosity anchored me in place. Gathering my courage, I pulled the flap open. What I found inside both surprised and unsettled me. The interior was filled with old, dusty crates, all marked with strange symbols I couldn't recognize. And in the center was a wooden box, similar to the one the nurse had mentioned. My heart raced as I stepped further in, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. As I approached the box, a sudden gust of wind blew through the clearing, flapping the tent wildly. A shadow darted past the entrance, and instinct kicked in. I turned to look, panic surging through me. I had to move. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Figures stood just beyond the flap, shrouded in darkness, their features obscured. They watched me intently as I held the key, the emblem of my fate resting heavily in my palm. "Must find the truth," one whispered, and the others echoed the sentiment, their voices layering into a chilling chant. "Must find the truth."
I felt the shadows behind me, their presence creeping closer. The clearing shrunk. That sensation of being trapped returned. These figures, they were more than just shapes. They were the darkness I had been running from, the shadows that had my name. I inhaled sharply, adrenaline coursing through my veins. There was no more time to hesitate. I lunged for the box, determined to uncover whatever secret lay inside. Just as my fingers brushed the surface, everything went dark. The shadows surged forward, their cries mingling with the whispers, overpowering my senses. The world around me twisted, shapes warping until all I saw were ghostly faces contorting in agony. Then, nothing. For a moment, the silence consumed me, and I thought I was lost forever. But then a blinding light cracked through the darkness, forcing me to shield my eyes. I felt the weight of the key drop from my fingers. I had no idea what I was about to uncover, but the stakes had never been higher. I had to find that key before whatever hunted me did the same. I awoke on the ground, the cold grass beneath me grounding me in reality after the chaos of the tent. Confused, I blinked against the blinding daylight filtering through the leaves above. The shadows were gone, but an unsettling emptiness remained, gnawing at my gut. For a moment I lay there, heart racing, piecing together what had just happened, but the memory slipped like sand through my fingers. "Mark," a voice echoed through the trees, familiar yet distant. The nurse. I caught my breath, the horror of the previous night flooding back. I scrambled to my feet, scanning the surroundings. This wasn't the hospital, nor was it the tent from before. I found myself on an overgrown path, bordered by jagged trees looming ominously on either side. The whispers from the shadows still echoed in my mind. Must find the truth. I reached into my pocket, the key still safely nestled there, a lifeline to what I needed to uncover. But what was the truth? The more I searched for meaning, the more fragmented my understanding felt. Who were those figures? Were they truly spirits of the past, or were they manifestations of my fear? With no visible choice, I took a step forward, setting out down the path. The forest around me was quiet, naturally so. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves and the flutter of the wind. I moved cautiously, the weight of the key heavy in my pocket. As I walked, I remained alert, half expecting the shadows to materialize again at any moment. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as I navigated through the twists and turns of the overgrown path, every crack of a branch causing my heart to quicken. Suddenly, a clearing opened up ahead. Nervously, I stepped into it, the sunlight pouring down in stark contrast to the gloom of the woods I had just traversed. In the center of the clearing, I spotted an old stone well, its edges crumbling and moss-covered.
My curiosity bubbled to the surface, urging me closer. As I approached, the air thickened with an electric charge, a lingering presence vibrating in the back of my mind. I knelt beside the well, peering into the depths. The darkness below felt almost sentient, as if it were reaching back up to me, whispering secrets I was unprepared to hear. I could feel the urge to drop the key into the well, to see if it would unlock something deeper. The memories of the child, the nurse, and the shadows danced in my thoughts, leaving me anxious. Just then, a distant laugh echoed through the air, cutting through my contemplation. Was I losing it? I shook my head, desperate to drown out the memories that clung to me like the shadows had. I stood abruptly, taking a step back from the well, as the laughter echoed again, now more urgent and insistent. "Mark, you have to find it." My pulse raced. It was her, the nurse's voice, clearer now. But where was she? "Find what?" I shouted into the woods, hoping for an answer. But all I received was the rustling of leaves, whispering of things lost to time. I dug the key out of my pocket and held it up, questioning its significance, as the laughter merged with the whispers, rising into a crescendo. Must find the truth. Feeling determined, I turned to face the well and hesitated. My fingers brushed against the ancient, cool stone. I leaned over, listening closely, the stillness of the air building a tension only those in search of the unknown could feel. "Do I drop it?" I murmured to myself. The key had to belong somewhere. Drawing a deep breath, I lifted the key above the well, preparing to drop it when suddenly the voice pierced through again. "No!" I spun around, heart racing. There was no one to be seen, just the trees hiding their secrets from view. "What do you want from me?" I yelled, feeling the weight of desperation hit me. My echoed voice faded into the silence, and I stared into the depths of the well once more, questioning everything. There was an urgency I couldn't shake. My thoughts tumbled chaotically. The faces of the child and the lost nurse remained stamped in my mind. Were the shadows just ghosts of those who never escaped? "Just tell me what to do," I pleaded,
lifting my hands in abandonment towards the well. And in that moment of vulnerability, all the hints and whispers that had once terrified me now pulsed with a sense of purpose. I began to understand. This wasn't only about the shadows or the edges of reality I had brushed against. It was about uncovering a past that needed to be acknowledged, a past that hovered just out of reach. Gathering my resolve, I lowered the key into the dark waters of the well. A moment of silence enveloped me, rocking on the fulcrum of hope and fear. The surface rippled, sending echoes into the darkness below. "Let it be the beginning of understanding," I whispered.
But before I could take a breath, a rush of cold air blew from the well as shadows danced, twisting around me. The laughter transformed into a howl, and I stumbled back as the world around me twisted. I watched in horror as the scene shifted. The clearing began to dissolve. The whispers returned, more urgent, more demanding. Must find the truth. It rippled through me, pushing me to confront what lay deeper inside. My thoughts raced, a million questions emerging. But there was only one undeniable truth at that moment. I might be free for now, but whatever I had awakened wouldn't rest until it revealed itself. I might have escaped the hospital and its horrors, but the shadows were not finished with me yet. I stood in the heart of that clearing, knowing that my journey had just begun, with the lingering uncertainty of what awaited me in the shadows, still hanging like an ominous shroud above.